Joining me now are two of my regular guests here on Credlin this week to get their take on the reign of Her Majesty and her particularly special bond with Australia. From Malali in New South Wales, former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson, and from Canberra, Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater. John, before we go to the Queen's connection, in particular with rural and regional Australia, she did tremendous work in Northern Ireland in 2011, and it's a big visit today for her son, King Charles.
It is. The Queen was a great unifier, and that was built, I think, on her enormous capacity for forgiveness and her generosity of spirit. Prince Charles, I think, deserves a lot of credit for the effort he's made in this regard. It reflects very well again on him that he's going there very early, and I think we wish him all the best because it's very important work indeed that he's embarking on there in the interests of the Union.
Nick, we talked a little bit before about Scotland. The fact the Queen died in Scotland has put a very Scottish flavour to the early days of these commemorative services. Now the Northern Ireland visit, the politics of the Union are very real for the King.
Well, that's right, Peter. When I was growing up, and indeed right into the 70s and 80s, Northern Ireland was effectively a part of the United Kingdom that was at civil war between the Republicans, which was the minority Catholics, and the Protestant majority, who were loyal to Great Britain and loyal to the Queen. And the Protestant majority used the Queen very much as a symbol of their patriotism, and so she became, rightly or wrongly, an icon in that war. And so I think you're right to point out that her visit to Ireland was a great peace. The Republic of Ireland was a great peace gesture, which has helped to heal wounds. And so I think for King Charles to go to Northern Ireland, he's going to every corner of the United Kingdom, of course, but to go to Northern Ireland is particularly poignant for those who grew up there during the Troubles, as they called them.
The Prime Minister, of course, today announced the 10 Australians who will travel to London at the Queen's request, not necessarily the names. She left that to the Prime Minister to choose, but she wanted 10 quite ordinary Australians, not just teams and teams of former Prime Ministers and others. In addition to the 10, there'll be Australian recipients of the Victoria Cross. We know some of them have already indicated they're on their way. And in addition to that, the official party will be the Prime Minister and spouse, Governor-General and spouse, or Prime Minister, of course, as a partner. They'll join the Acting High Commissioner, Lynette Wood, who's obviously based here in the UK. John, what do you make of the way in which the Queen's hand is played out across who will represent Australia at her funeral?
And again, a great act of generosity, I think, on the past Queen's attitude and the way she went about things. I don't know how they were selected. They represent us now. I wish them well. I'm absolutely delighted to see Danny Abdullah there from I Forgive. I think he and his family really reflect so much of the values that the Queen would have respected and that we ought to as well. I don't want to single anybody out, but I just think that's a tremendous choice. If I could be forgiven for just making one comment, given their deep attachment to rural and regional Australia, I'd have loved to have seen a prominent Bushy there somewhere.
I would too, and I'll come to that point because they were very determined when I was involved in any sort of planning for royal visits. This is the broader royal family as well, to get out of the capital cities. They loved rural and regional Australia. Before we go to that though, Nick, you've written brilliantly in The Australian this week about the whole Republic debate that's come up, I think improperly so early, pushed in part by the Greens, but plenty of others who should know better. Australians are grieving a Queen. They're mourning her service, even if they're not necessarily great royalists or constitutional monarchists. I can't see this push growing momentum anytime soon. I know the PM's pushed it off, but others want it to continue to be a debating point. I don't think Australians are up for it just yet.
Well, I think the PM was foolish to appoint an assistant minister for the Republic, which makes it look like it's on his agenda. Why else would he have an assistant minister? But I think he was probably amongst many on the Republican side of the argument that were looking forward almost ghoulishly to the moment when the Queen would depart this earth and her son, who they regarded as less popular, would take over. Well, two things I think are happening, Peter. We can see it. Number one, Prince Charles is immediately going to authority in office. I don't think he's going to be anything like the unpopular figure that people are predicting. And two, I think, I mean, I'm one of those, I think, who for the first time in their life are seeing the continuity. It's not just the person, it's the continuity of office. That is an amazing thing, and I think it's bringing home to people that it's actually not the Queen, popular as she is, or King Charles, to whom we owe our allegiance. We owe it to the Crown. It's a wonderful institution which has served this country well in terms of constitutional stability.
John, I think that's a very, very powerful point made there by Nick. We've seen the King and we've seen the Queen. We've seen them over many years, of course, now. But we're seeing the Crown operate, and it's a rare thing in your own lifetime to see this transition.
It is, and I think the continuity is important. The idea of a symbolic head of state who can influence, who can set an example, who's above the bipartisanship and the rows of the day is, as interestingly enough, Jordan Peterson from Canada's pointed out, beyond value. And I think that's something Australians will perceive and pick up on. I think the other thing about it is that the whole way in which the Queen modelled the idea of service leadership and evidently found, I'll use the word, a joy in finding herself in giving of herself rather than accumulating power and influence for her own purposes, is very sobering. And that, I hope, is something that the naysayers, the negatives, the graspers for power, so ugly in so much of our society today, might stop and think about, and the rest of us might also seek to remind them that this grasping for power that we see now, for one's own ends, for the purposes of ideology rather than service, says something very profound about character. Just as the Crown speaks to our better angels, so does the behaviour and the performance and the decency of the Queen over so many years.
Nick, I think you made a point before, and I find myself turning to it quite a bit as I listen to King Charles and speeches he's making and really picking the mood. I think he's been underestimated, and I think we're going to see a very different man as sovereign.
I think that's clear. Look, he's had the longest apprenticeship of any sovereign in history, so he's surely got to have picked up a few things during that period. He's very consciously referred to his mother and her example. I think he like me, like anybody who's followed that wartime generation, have nothing but admiration for them. And he is consciously following her model. He could have no better role model. I think he's going to really slot into that role very well. The Queen Consort, I think, has, despite all the controversy over his marriage to her after the death of Diana, the Queen Consort, I think, has behaved impeccably ever since she married Prince Charles. I think she'll continue to do so, and the two of them will play the proper role, which is as figureheads, not getting involved in the politics. That's actually why the system works, because they stay well out of the politics.
John, a quick one from you. The Queen and, of course, Prince Philip, they visited the regions over 16 times. How will regional Australia, rural Australia, remember the Queen?
Oh, I think very highly, but it'll be more than just the Queen. The Queen's family are plainly very committed to rural and regional people in their own country, and Scotland included. And you saw the same thing here. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to both of them over the years about it. You could tell that their passion was real, their interest was real, and that was reciprocated, I think. And remember, too, that her grandsons spent quite a bit of time, particularly Harry, in regional areas, Queensland and regional New South Wales.
John and Nick, thank you for joining me tonight live from London.
Thanks,
Great
Peter.
to have your company.